Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen-Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancy Eaton, a Millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 7, Wake Me Up Before You Pokemon Go-Go. Welcome back to another episode of Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. I'm Chris McBrien, along with Yancy Eaton. This week we're going to be talking about video games. So this should be interesting, that's for sure. Because let me tell you, when I was growing up, video games had basically just come out. And some of the technology was, how can I put this nicely, substandard. So my list is going to be probably ridiculed like crazy, but that's all good. We've gotten some awesome feedback on the show so far. And, you know, the thing is, when you talk about lists of your favorite things, movies, TV shows, whatever, you're bound to get lots of people with their own opinions of, you know, kind of what stuff we've left out or what we should be talking about. So I tell you what, if you'd like to contact us about anything that you hear here on the show, you can reach us on Twitter at Yancy Eaton or at C McBrien. Remember, McBrien is spelled I-E-N, or shoot us an email, Chris at popgoesyourworld.com or Yancy at popgoesyourworld.com. And speaking of Yancy, how are you this week, my friend?
Yes, I am Yancy. I'm doing well. I'm a little tired from stuff going on outside of the podcast world, just work and life stuff. Everything's good. Just, you know, sometimes you get a little run down, but it's nice to get on Skype with one of your buddies in another country and just talk about stupid stuff like video games. So I'm excited. This is going to be a fun show. And for once, I think this is going to be one of the few topics where I think what my generation brings to the table is actually better than yours.
Oh, well, you bring good stuff to the table. Last week, some of the feedback we got, I mentioned feedback at the top of the show, some of the feedback we got was everybody loved your lists of our last show when we were talking about cult movies. They were like, Yancey's list dominated Chris's list. So you bring all the goods every single week. There's no two ways about it. But yeah, I think when it comes to video games, my generation lags somewhat behind yours, and no two ways about it. But I got to mention, you know, before we get started, I've noticed that there's this phenomenon that I've noticed lately where people watch other people play video games on YouTube. And call me crazy, but it seems like it's a little bit ridiculous. Like, I don't get it. It all started out because my 7-year-old liked to play, he really enjoys playing Minecraft. And then he found all these things on YouTube where you go and you just watch people play Minecraft. It'd be one thing, like, you know, if you were getting, like, I don't know, like some cheat codes or something like that. But I mean, to sit there for hours and watch someone else play a game doesn't even make sense. I mean, play the friggin' game yourself. I mean, like I say, I get it if you're watching it to get tips and stuff, but just sitting there and watching another person play it, I think it's just weird.
You know what? I understand what you're saying, how it would sound weird, and I used to think the same thing too. But just as like a little background as far as like my video gaming consumption these days, I do not own a single video game system or console. I don't have a single game on my phone minus Pokemon Go, and even that I've played a fraction of what I played even 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'm not somebody who plays a lot of video games at all. But I actually watch streamers on Twitch, you know, actual streaming games all the time, simply because, like, you know, whenever something comes out, a game like No Man's Sky or Destiny, or, you know, it's still something that people talk about. I want to know what it's about, and I don't want to have to spend $60 on a game and $250 on a console. And it is actually really entertaining because you're not so much watching it just because of the game, but the person behind it. There are talented, you know, Twitch streamers, just like there are talented painters or artists or anything like that. So it is something weird, but it's one of those things where I think if you found somebody that you really liked and it was a game that you enjoyed, I think you'd be surprised by how much time you could kill doing it. It's like that theory where if there's like a kid's cartoon on, you're like, oh, this is so stupid, I can't believe this. But then like an hour later, you're still watching it. It's one of those things where I think once if you get into it, Chris, you might actually find something you like about it.
Well, I know that our buddy Paul Sporer from our old baseball show, he does a live thing like that with MLB The Show. Am I right? Like, so you can go and watch him play and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's another thing, Chris. Not to cut you off, but yeah. I watch him play it all the time, and I have never played the game myself ever. But I like Paul. I like Paul's personality. I like the way he just, you know, he puts himself out there and stuff. So it's entertaining because, like, I like the person. Doesn't matter what game he's playing. He could be playing, you know, My Little Pony 2 or something.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I can see where you're coming from. But the thing is, like, one other difference between millennials and Gen Xers when it comes to playing video games is now you've got so much content out there, and there's so many great places you can go for tips and kind of things like that. Like back in my day, you had to wait a month for a subscription to a video magazine, in order to get like cheat codes or tips or anything like that. Or better yet, you had to actually play the friggin' game. To discover how to do yours. Yeah. I'm like the old man that yells at kids in his neighborhood, like, "Get off my lawn, you meddling kids!" I'm like that guy. But I don't know. There's a lot of differences between millennials and Gen Xers when it comes to video games. One of them I would say off the top is that I think there's. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's less stigma around playing video games nowadays. Like when I was younger, if you played a lot of video games, you were considered a nerd. At least, I think you were considered more of a nerd than you are if you're a big gamer today. Is there some truth to that, you think?
I think it depends on... Nowadays, just about everybody plays video games in some form. I mean, if I had to guess, do you have any video games on your phone? Do you have any apps that you play games on your phone?
No, I don't.
None at all? Okay, so I would actually say that you're kind of the exception rather than the norm. I don't have any... games on my phone minus the Pokemon, like I said, but I think it's more or less these days of what types of games you play. Like if you're the type of person who's playing RPGs and Warcraft and that type of thing, you might be, quote unquote, I'm doing finger quotes to myself, a nerd, but everybody plays games these days. Everybody. I mean, it's just... Except
me, apparently, but I'm the guy that yells at kids to get off my front lawn.
Yeah, so you're Clint Eastwood and what's the movie? I can't remember the movie.
Gran Torino?
Yes, Gran Torino. Thank you.
Yeah. So the other thing I would mention is that the difference between our generations. When I was a kid, if you wanted to play a video game, like you had to go to the arcade. Mm-hmm. Like, so I think in other words, like playing a video game was sort of a social activity, home video games and video game consoles, they were sort of just coming out when I was a kid. And the ones that we did have were really, really crappy. So, Yancy, I'll tell you what, if you went back in time and the only video games that you had to play were Asteroids or Pitfall or Pong, you'd probably throw yourself out of a window.
Oh my.
Knowing what I know now, yeah, I probably would.
Yeah, I tell you. Anyway, you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Okay, let's go. Back in 1985.
I don't want to give people the wrong idea.
Saved by the Bell, the college years.
My wife knows about this. She's cool with this.
Like the girl from Dirty Dancing and Ferris Bueller?
I am in love with dank memes.
MC Micro G and DJ Swen.
Black people Twitter.
We'll go to Ring-a-Dong for a holiday.
It's not something you just want to advertise.
Because rapping is my thing and I do it every day.
As you're singing this, I'm like cringing for you.
I pretend that I have my own show on the Food Network. All right, our top 5 video games. Yancy, why don't you take us away with your number 5?
Okay, so
this is going to be good, by the way. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
This is going to be a good show.
We always have little caveats just to kind of explain like our methodology for compiling our lists.
For sure.
For me, it was a game not necessarily that was the best game, but a game that was a really big part at any point in my life, especially obviously like my early childhood or my preteens, like being a teenager through high school, that type of thing. So it was a game that I played a lot, that my friends knew about. It was super, super relevant in my day to day. So number 5, I was first introduced to this game I think in first grade, and it's Oregon Trail. Have you played it, Chris?
No.
You've never played Oregon Trail?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right.
Fill me in, please.
Okay, so Oregon Trail was originally developed by Dan Rawich, Bill Heineman, and Paul Dillenberger in 1971. It's actually a really, really old game. It was designed to teach school children about the realities of 19th century pioneer life in the Oregon Trail. But to be honest with you, Chris, I only ever played it because you can hunt in it. So I would literally hunt in one area so much that like I would basically wipe out entire swaths of like animal populations.
You're causing animals to become extinct.
Yeah, literally. Like that's literally the only reason why I played it. Most of the kids who played it in school, that's why they played it too. I was just doing a little bit of research before the show. I didn't realize just how much it had saturated like the American psyche. It sold over 65 million physical copies with 10 different versions being released over 40 years. Wow. 40 years. What was really the key to its success is it actually came bundled with most school purchase PCs for like 20 years. So basically any personal computer you bought, a school district bought, obviously they would buy them in bulk. They all came with Oregon Trail pre-installed on it. One of my most fond memories was, like my siblings dying of dysentery or cholera or typhoid fever. It was like a really weird game where like it was one of those first games that basically tricked kids into learning. Like you didn't even realize that you were actually learning something while you were playing it, but it was just such a weird, like 2D game, but it was incredibly addictive, and I played it all through elementary school. So Oregon Trail, you need to play it before you die, Chris. It's important.
I'll put it on my bucket list for sure.
Yeah, do it.
All right, that's a good one. Okay, so my number 5, I'm going a little bit generic here, but it's hockey. Okay? And it doesn't matter if you played Nintendo's Ice Hockey or Blades of Steel or whatever hockey video game it was. What mattered the most was that, okay, you got to think back in time. If you were growing up in the 80s, not to give you a big history lesson or anything, but growing up in the 80s was growing up in the middle of the Cold War. And there was no bigger fear than the Soviet Union. And movies like The Day After, they were in the sort of general consciousness. So when you played video game hockey, it was like a chance to play against the Russian commies, And as a kid, it was like you could take on the Soviet Union and help win the Cold War all by yourself. And I know it sounds crazy, but if you grew up at that time, you'd know what I'm talking about. And it was right around the time of A Miracle on Ice. And so ice hockey was more popular than ever, especially in the States. In Canada, hockey is always the biggest thing ever. So no matter if you lived north or south of the border, playing hockey on a video game was a huge, huge thing. And for that reason, it makes my number 5. What's your 4?
Interesting. So that was your own way of your own way of defeating communism, basically.
It was by playing video game hockey. It was massive. It was huge.
Okay. All right. So number 4 for me, I don't think you would have heard of this game. This didn't have nearly I don't know how to say, but nearly the name recognition, I guess is the word I'm looking for, as some other popular fighting game titles during its time, like Mortal Kombat. This game is called Soul Calibur, and it was released in 1998. I played it for the Sega Dreamcast, which to this day...
the Sega Dreamcast!
Yeah, the Dreamcast. Yeah. It flopped commercially, but I still believe that it was the greatest console ever released up to that point. It was criminally underrated. It did not get just the publicity that it deserved. It did not get the promotion that it needed to succeed, and Sega pulled the plug on it entirely too early. But the Dreamcast was just the best system ever, and I loved it. But the name of the game was Soul Calibur. It was originally an arcade game, like you were talking about, that they ported to an actual console, and it was like one of the title games for the Sega Dreamcast when it first came out. It was actually one of the first fighting games to implement what they called forgiving buffering, which basically meant like you didn't have to be exactly precise whenever you were pressing combinations of buttons for like moves and stuff, so it could kind of almost sense and like see that you were getting combinations of moves correctly, and you didn't have to be so rigid where like you would see your opponent make a move and then you'd have to wait a second and then you'd have to do your combination and see the move. It was like this really clean, superfluous movement between two players fighting, so it was like really kind of groundbreaking in that sense. It actually scored a 10 out of 10, which is obviously a perfect score from multiple outlets like GameSpot and IGN whenever it first came out. So it's one of the only perfect games ever released in the last 25 years. You want to talk about like early childhood crushes? Taki and Sophisha and Ivy and Sungmina. These are all fighters in this game. And those were my first crushes. Is these really, really badass and power, like awesome women, who could just beat the holy crap out of guys and stuff in this. But one of those one of those video games where it was super critically acclaimed. It never had immense, commercial success rather, but everybody still alludes to that game as being one of the greatest fighting games of all time and how it pushed barriers as far as the genre goes. If you look on any 100 greatest games of all time or 100 greatest fighting games of all time, it's right there at the very top. So Soul Calibur for me is my number 4. If they were able to put it on my Mac right now and give me a USB Sega Dreamcast controller where I could play it, literally I would call off work for a week just to play this. This was one of the most fantastic games ever, Chris. So Soul Calibur, number 4.
Very cool. And just as an aside, by the way, we are totally doing a crush show in the near future, for sure. I think comparing millennial, celebrity crushes to like Gen X crushes should be very interesting. But that's up for another episode. Okay, I'm going to stick with sports. I'm going to go with, for my number 4, electronic quarterback. Yancy, you got to Google this thing. It was the first sort of really popular handheld video game, and it was basically a football field, which was basically just some grid lines, and the players were just little red blips, and you tried to maneuver your quarterback, which was just a little blip, and you tried to maneuver him from like left to right across the field, and by today's standards, let's face it, it's awful. But when it came out in 1978, it was revolutionary. And they did have a couple other football games that were out like it, that were out at the time. But Electronic Quarterback was the only one that you had two blockers and it allowed you to pass. And most of the time, you just ran it up the field. But you could pass if you wanted to. And it, like I say, certainly wasn't a great game, by pretty much anyone's standards. But it was a game changer because it put games in the palm of your hand. And since it was based on sports, you were less likely to get beat up by the schoolyard bully if you were playing it. But it was like as basic can be. But in terms of being new and leading the way for a lot of progress in video games, it was pretty groundbreaking. And it was actually pretty fun to play. So Electronic Quarterback is the one. You got to Google it.
Do you happen to still have one of those on you?
I don't have a physical Electronic Quarterback, no.
Because that sounds like the type of thing you'd go to your mom's house and she had one in the basement and you dust it off and that would be cool. But.
Yeah, it would be cool. Okay, what's your number 3, bud?
My number 3 is Pokemon Red and Blue. Okay, so I have to give you a little bit of back info really quick about Pokemon Red.
Please do, yeah.
Okay, so...
Is it like Johnny Walker Red? Is that the deal?
Not quite, no.
Unfortunately.
So here's the thing about this. It made my list as the third best game of all time, despite the fact that I have never personally played it. But hear me out. You're going to say, but Yancy, how is that possible? So I'll give you
a real quick... How is that possible?
How is that possible, right? So I was a kid, and my brother and I, we shared a room my entire life. He and I shared a room. My sister shared a room. And I remember one day he came home, and he had a Game Boy. And I was like, whoa, where'd you get a Game Boy? That's crazy. Mom didn't buy it for him. It wasn't his birthday. So I was really confused. Not to, make my brother look bad, but come to find out he had an altercation with a kid upon which he seized control of his Game Boy. He commandeered his Game Boy. Okay. So, he had Pokemon Red in it, and he and I had bunk beds, right? So he would sleep on the bottom, I would sleep on the top. And the deal that he and I we came up with basically was he would be so kind as to let me watch him play the game by sticking it out over the bed to where I can look down and watch him play it, as long as I promise not to snitch on him to my mom for commandeering this Game Boy. So for about 3 years, I would watch him play this game. And even though, like I said, never actually personally played it myself, the countless hours that he and I stayed up together and, 4 or 5 hours after we were supposed to go to bed, staying up all night watching him play this game, evolving Pokemon, catching Pokemon, fighting people, all this stuff. I mean, literally, it was one of those things where, he and I have almost bonded over this. It was really weird. We hardly talked at all, obviously, because Mom would hear us. But just watching him play that game, and it just spurred this insane love for Pokemon that I had, and it's what got me into collecting the trading cards and stuff. And it was just something that he and I always kind of had. And now we kind of laugh about it. Obviously, he felt bad about it. I think he eventually gave the Game Boy back to this kid, but it was just this really neat story. So Pokemon Red and Blue is number 3 for me. Like I said, I do need to play it. I know that seems like a little bit of a cop-out, but it was a really, really pivotal game in Yancey's arc of loving Pokemon. So
I think that's pretty cool. And the thing is, he should actually get his own channel on YouTube playing games so everyone can watch him do it. It'd just be old times,
Let's do it.
Okay, so my number 3, Donkey Kong. It originally came out in 1981, and you had to control Jumpman up this construction girders and ladders because a giant ape stole his girlfriend Pauline. And then they finally gave Jumpman his own name, and of course it was Mario, which led to Super Mario and Super Mario Brothers and all the spin-offs. But it all started with Jumpman trying to dodge rolling barrels that were thrown at him by a big ape who stole his girlfriend. And then they came out with Donkey Kong Jr., and in that one, Donkey Kong, he was captured, and you played Baby Kong, and you had to swing on vines, and you had to eat all this fruit, and then Mario was sending down these bear traps with eyes on them. Video games were really weird back then. Yancy, I don't know what to say. But the original Donkey Kong basically spawned a whole generation of video games. It was really influential, and it was actually a lot of fun to play. So number 3 for me is Donkey Kong.
I've never played that particular Donkey Kong game, but I definitely played the hell out of some Donkey Kong Country for Super Nintendo. Absolutely. That game was amazing. So what are we on, number 2?
Number 2, yeah. What's your number 2?
All right, so number 2 for me is kind of the entire franchise, but it's going to be Halo for me. So Halo is obviously a first-person shooter. It came out on Xbox. And I'm primarily talking about Halo 2 and Halo 3 because those were the 2 games that I mostly played whenever I was a kid. But Halo, like I said, Halo was first-person shooter. It's based like in the future where there's two conflicting sides, like an alien race and like basically like the Marine Corps or like the future, version of the Marine Corps. That's the campaign mode. But to be completely honest with you, I never played the campaign mode. I only played online, or I played, like LAN, like connecting with other Xboxes and stuff. It was one of those games where like, with my group of friends, we never, were big drinkers. We never were, smoking doobies or anything like that. I don't know if you call them doobies or not, but, that was never really our scene. What my group of friends always did, talking about nerdy stuff, is we had Halo parties where literally everybody would come over. We'd bring our Xboxes, we'd bring our controllers, we'd all, chip in and order pizza, and we would literally have Halo tournaments all night long. And just, it's you basically have a gun and you throw grenades and you shoot each other, and it was awesome. And all through from the time I was probably 14 or 15 years old till maybe 20, that's literally the only game I played. That was it. Just Halo all the time. And it was like the most important thing that you had in your home, aside from your Xbox, was like a high-speed internet connection so that you could play Halo. One quick story. My brother, my best friend, and myself, we all got suspended from school because we used to constantly bring our Xbox. We would literally bring them in our backpacks every single day so we could play Halo. And we were all in band, so we would, we'd always be in the band room, and we'd use the overhead projector to project this huge Halo screen to play onto this huge wall. And one day we had a substitute teacher who told us to put it away. So we went to the back equipment room, and we basically locked her out. And they had to call like the principal and stuff, and he showed up, and we ended up getting suspended for it because he literally barges through the doors and he sees us playing Halo. And my mom wasn't pleased, my dad wasn't pleased, but it's one of those games that's like still stuck with me. Occasionally I'll hop on my brother-in-law's Xbox and play with my buddy up in Montana and stuff, and there's so much nostalgia that's just attached to that because so much of my teen years were spent playing that game that like I think it's one of those things where I'll always be a sucker for the newest version of it, just as long as they continue making it, and I'll keep coming back to it over and over and over again. So Halo is number 2 for me. It was almost number 1, but I had to leave it at number 2.
Very cool. Oh, and just to answer your question, Yancy, Gen-Xers did in fact refer to them as doobies.
Oh, my, my, my.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Okay, my number 2, you probably had to have a few doobies to play this game too, was actually Space Invaders. So it's basically just a laser cannon that moves left and right and shoots at these sort of 5 rows of oncoming aliens, and all of them are just like these blocky sort of monochromatic things. And the thing is, as you shoot them, the music speeds up, and so do they. And then you've got these barricades to hide behind, and they keep shooting pieces of them away. They're trying to get at you. And then there's this occasional like mystery ship that goes along the top, and you get bonus points for shooting it. And Space Invaders was it was one of the first, if not the first, video game that also came like as a sit-down version at the arcade. Like you sat in a chair and was actually like a glass tabletop, and you had to reach underneath it and work the joystick and the buttons. And funny enough, it was the first game that featured a difficulty curve. So it got harder as it went along. But the funny thing was, as a piece of trivia, it wasn't intentional. So again, as I mentioned off the top of the show, the technology back when I was a kid, when it came to video games, was sort of substandard. So the processing unit was overloaded in this game. It couldn't handle all the aliens marching across the screen at the same time. So as you shot them and as they disappeared, the game, quote unquote, sped up. And
really?
But it made it more difficult, of course, but it only sped up just because there wasn't the lag when the screen was full of images. So sort of unintentionally, the game ushered in a whole era of games that featured a difficulty curve. And it was only because of the inability of the technology of the day to keep up. And so that's really cool. And I think it's also important, to note that the whole first-person shooter video game genre, I think, owes its legacy to Space Invaders. Because, like a lot of pop culture stuff from Gen X, it's groundbreaking. It was the first, and in a lot of ways, I think it's still the best. On to your number 1.
Okay. Nice. I have played Space Invaders, but I did not play it on an original console. I actually played it as an emulator on my computer to where like I could download it and I had to play it with a keyboard. I have played it and it was fun. It's one of those things where like you said, if I had to play it all the time, I'd probably kill myself. But but I can respect it for for what it was at the time.
There you go. All
right, so my number 1. It was a toss-up between 2 Super Mario titles, and I ended up going with Super Mario World simply because I played it the most. So Super Mario World obviously came out in 1990 for the Super Nintendo, the SNES, the Super Nintendo system. This was a game where just like I was talking about with Pokemon, I actually didn't play it as much as another person in my family, and this might surprise some people, but my mother is actually like the Super Mario World champion.
Cool.
So here's the thing about the Super Mario, or the Super Nintendo system rather. My mom had 4 kids, and she wanted to play too. Obviously, this system didn't have 5 controllers. So there were many times where just to settle like a fight, my mom would play and we would watch, right? So there were so many nights where we would just sit there, watch my mom playing, and she'd be like, okay, you guys have to go to bed. So then, of course, we lived in a 2-story house, so we'd go walk up the stairs, and we'd just kind of be, like, hanging over the edge. And she knew we were watching, but I guess that was kind of her way of saying, like, oh, I sent them to bed. Like, if they don't go to sleep, that's on them kind of thing. But for hours, we would watch my mom just go through this, and she ended up unlocking everything, all 7 worlds. She saved Dinosaur Land. I mean, Peach is good, Toad's good, everybody's good. It's one of the most like original, inventive, just incredibly interesting and creative games I've ever seen. And like we talked about with cult films, it still has such an incredible like cult following. I mean, Super Mario World and any of the Mario titles, really, it doesn't matter how good or bad they are, they will always sell millions and millions of titles. The original Super Mario World sold over 25 million titles just because it's such an iconic franchise, and I think it's always going to be around. But if I had to add up all the hours that I've played Super Mario World, it would be almost at least 1,000 hours I played. So tons of nostalgic value for this. I almost want to buy a Super Nintendo and just kind of like leave it at my mom's house just to kind of like get her back into it, because there's so many like good memories attached to that, and it's such a great game. So Super Mario World is my number one. Very
cool. I'll tell you what, if there was one video game that changed everything, it's the number one on my list, and that's Pac-Man. Nice. It took everything by storm. It quickly became this huge staple in pop culture. It was so popular, Yancy, dude. I'm telling you, they even had its own song. A song came out called Pac-Man Fever by Buckner and Garcia. It wasn't very good, by the way. It was like, I got a pocket full of quarters and I'm heading to the arcade. It was just terrible. And there was a spin-off. There was Ms. Pac-Man, and there was a kids' cartoon show. And the thing is, if you think about it, like up until then, video games were either shooter games like Space Invaders or Asteroids, or sports games. And Pac-Man came along and created a whole new genre of video games. Like, you're this little yellow puck that eats pellets and tries to avoid ghosts. And that brings to mind a couple pieces of trivia I want to share with you. So the game was originally called Puckman, but Namco, they changed it because they were worried about people vandalizing the side of the game and blocking out the P to make an F.
Oh my God.
So they changed it to Pac-Man. And the reason why the bad guys in Pac-Man are called ghosts is only because when they came out with the game on the Atari 2600, the technology was so bad that the bad guys would flicker. So to cover up the game flaws, they called them ghosts.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm telling you. Like I say, technology was subpar back in those days. But no matter what the deficiencies were of Pac-Man, the game became this huge symbol of 80s pop culture. It was on lunchboxes, T-shirts. It was everywhere, right? And it was at a time when video games were new, and they were, considered all high tech. And the leader of the pack, pun intended, was Pac-Man, and that's why it makes my number one.
Very nice.
There's our list. Not too bad. You want to have a little bit of fun together?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right, time for some
fun with Yancy.
All right, this week I'm going to be quizzing you, Yancy. So we're going to see how much you know about some of the old school video games. I'm going to give you lots of hints. So we're going to make it a lot of fun, okay?
Okay.
So, Number one, this is widely considered to be the first real quote-unquote video game. So the game basically consisted of 2 lines on either side of the screen. You had to bounce a little blip. It was supposed to be a ball. It was based on table tennis. It was such a huge success that it basically ushered in the entire video game era. Yancy, can you name this video game?
I can name this. I've actually played it on an Atari, and it's called Pong.
Very good. Yes. You use your paddle to deflect the ball back to the other side. It just went back and forth.
And it does get faster, too, correct?
It does, yep. It does. It speeds up. It was like the simplest video game ever. But the thing was, it was like the first video game. And so for that reason, obviously, highly influential and really important in the history of video game development. Okay, number 2. This video game debuted in 1983, and it was the first that actually featured hand-drawn animation to depict the gameplay. The animation was created by former Disney animator Don Bluth, and you were able to control the hero, and his name was Dirk the Daring. and he went through several dungeons attempting to reach the final destination of the dragon's lair where he rescued the princess Daphne. Can you name the video game?
What were the names again? The names of the characters?
Dirk the Daring, and he went through the dragon to try and all these through these dungeons to get to the dragon's lair where he tried to rescue the princess Daphne.
Oh, I feel like this is some sort of. As soon as you're going to say it, I know. Is it like Dragon Quest or something? It
took place in a dragon's lair, actually.
But it's not called Dragon Quest?
No, it's called Dragon's Lair.
Oh, that's...
Yeah. Lots of hits for you. The thing was, too, in a piece of trivia, it was the first video game, I remember this, I used to love playing it in the arcade. It was the first video game that cost 50 cents to play. Everything up to that time was only a quarter.
Really? Wow, pricey.
Okay, so here's one for you. The Connecticut Leather Company was founded in 1932, and they were like a leading manufacturer of all things above ground swimming pools. But what they did was they switched their focus to producing toys and home-based video game consoles back in the early 80s. And they came out with a wildly popular line of toys called the Cabbage Patch Kids. And then they soon started producing home video game console, and it was known for its state-of-the-art graphics. We had one in our house, and we were like, the hippest people on the block, right? Because we had this thing. So what company did the Connecticut Leather Company shorten their name to become?
Connecticut Leather
Company. They shortened their name. They took their name and they shortened it to this. They took the first two letters of each of the words in their company name, and they became this video game innovator.
I don't know, Chris. I feel like I should know this, and I don't.
The first two letters of Connecticut, the first two letters of leather, the first two letters of company spells Coleco.
Coleco?
Yes. Have you ever heard of ColecoVision?
I've never heard of that, no.
Oh, man. Like I said, I actually had one of those consoles. It was like the highest quality thing going.
That's really what it was. That was their origin story? They used to... Connecticut Leather?
The Connecticut Leather Company, yep.
That is so odd.
Yeah.
Okay,
so back in the days of like 8-bit video games, Nintendo came out with a handheld 8-bit video game, and it was released in 1989. I realize it was a year after you were born, but it was hugely successful, and it pretty much revolutionized gaming as we know it today. Can you name this handheld video device that was released by Nintendo in 1989?
Was it just the original Game Boy?
It was, yes. Congratulations. There you go. Okay, this highly addictive puzzle game was developed by a Russian programmer and featured falling pieces of tile puzzles, which you had to maneuver into place and have them fit into each other, and and then you go on to additional levels. And it was basically responsible for the success of the Game Boy video system. Can you name the game?
Yeah, it's Tetris.
Oh, you're very, very
Tetris.
good.
Oh.
Nice. The pieces that came down, they were known as tetraminos, and you could move them sideways and rotate them and everything. It was pretty cool.
I did not know that.
Okay, one last one for you. This is an easy one too, okay? This game was inspired by a 1982 Disney film. It was manufactured and distributed by Bally Midway. There's like 12 difficulty levels in it, and there's different segments in it, included things like the input-output tower, there was the MCP cone, battle tanks, and of course, the very popular light cycles. Can you name the video game?
Chris, I have no idea.
It's a Disney film from 1982. It starred Jeff Bridges. He was trapped inside a video game, and another film was made in the series in 2010.
Tron.
Yay!
Yes,
see, you
Tron.
can do this. Not bad, I tell you. All right, man. So not bad. Like I say, a lot of discrepancies in video games, obviously from your generation and my generation. My generation kind of paved the way, obviously, of video games. And man, we sure went through all the kind of ups and downs and kind of navigated the pitfalls of that. No two ways about it. But anyway, lots of differences. Lots of fun. Video games are still as popular as they ever were, if not more so. But I tell you, back in the day, it was like, I used to go to the arcade. I used to hang out at the arcade. I get back home from school, and we'd go to the arcade, and on weekends, go to the arcade and play. They had pool tables there, but it was all about the video games, and it was a lot of fun. But anyway, listen, time to wrap things up. We got to get going. Like as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you want to reach out to us, you're going to find us on Twitter at Yancy Eaton or at C. McBrien. At email, Chris@popgoesyourworld.com or Yancy@popgoesyourworld.com. Until next week, this is Chris McBrien for Yancy Eaton saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter at C. McBrien or at Yancy Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.